short talk about bisexual people of colour, and not just the famous ones, but about the history, about our history, and something that a lot of bisexual people get is that we don't exist. We don't exist now, and we never existed in the past, and we're making it all up, and there's a lot of crap that goes with it. I'm going to, because this is quite short, I'm going to talk a bit about the ancient past, a bit about more recent past, that's a proper word, and there's going to be a couple of poems added in because that's me. So when it comes to history of LGBT people, it's often difficult anyway because because there's a lot of homophobia out there, because words change, and because people in the past may not have existed and may not have identified as gay or lesbian because those words meant something completely different. I don't think that's scrolling through at all. Is it gonna? Oh, okay.
I can just do it every 10 seconds.
Cheers. So for example, like 200 years ago, the word gay meant happy. The word lesbian meant somebody who came from the island of Lesbos. And until 1892, the word bisexual meant somebody who was intersex. It was only in 1892 that a US neurologist called Dr. Jacq used the word bisexual to describe people who pretty much as people who describe as bisexual, pretty much in a way that people describe themselves as bisexual now. And I specifically describe myself as bisexual because I have an attraction to more than one gender. That's it. It's a really simple definition. There's nothing about who I might have sex with, who I might fall in love with. It's just about attraction and more than one gender. Because of all of this, because biphobia and racism is a pretty heady mix, it's one of the reasons why bisexual people of colour in history get erased, and actually why bisexual people of colour get erased now, in the present. And that's why history is really important to me. And I'm not a historian. I'm doing this as very much on an amateur basis. But I'm also doing it because I'm sick of people being erased and of myself being erased. Like someone's got a giant kind of eraser on a giant pencil, and it's just like taking me out of existence just while I'm standing here. And it made me think about who writes history, who records history, what is the stuff that gets into books, into curriculums. And for the most part, it's straight white men. Those are the books that are going to turn up in libraries and in education, because those are the people who tend to get published. Bisexual people don't tend to get published. People of colour don't tend to get published. I'm also a writer, I know what I speak. It's just, publishing is incredibly white, in fiction and in non-fiction. So, another thing is that, somebody mentioned it earlier, I think Jacq did, about how the behaviour, black sexuality, it's just spoken about like it's not a real thing. Anything we do as regards to sex is just us being, oh, that's how those exotic people behave. And so, for, say, a black bisexual person, especially if they're actually, it doesn't matter what gender they are, their sexuality is seen as quite animal-like and beastly. And when it comes to Asian bisexual people, or actually Asian people in full stop, their sexuality is seen as being very submissive, very passive, and they're just waiting for a virile white person to come along and show them a good time. But it wasn't always this way. In, about 3,000 years BC, there's an epic poem called Gilgamesh. And Gilgamesh is set in Sumeria, which became Babylon, which became Iraq right now. And it tells of bisexual people of colour having adventures and lots of sex as well. And the main character was a wild man living in the forest with all the animals, and the ruler of the time really didn't like that. And so he sent out a beautiful woman to Jacq, basically. And so after they had sex, none of the animals wanted to have anything to do with him, and somehow sex had civilized him. So he goes off to the city, falls in love with a man who won't give away the spoiler, but it ultimately breaks his heart. But this is somebody who's had sex and felt affection and attraction to more than one gender. There were people of colour, and they were living 3,000 years BC. So it's like 5,000 years ago, this was happening. And even though it's an epic poem, and it's a work of fiction, it was also based on something that was happening. Also, again, as a writer, no matter how fantastical your stories are, they're probably going to be based on something that's real and something that sparks off that creativity. Moving a bit further on in time, you get to medieval China and the phenomena called the cut sleeve people. And this kind of first started off with the Emperor Ai, who would have had concubines and wives and had to produce an heir and had women around, but also had a lover called Dong Zhan. And one night they fall asleep, and in the morning the emperor has to get up and kill some people, go into battle. But he finds that his lover, Dong Zhan, is sleeping on his clothes, and so rather than get the lazy git out of bed, so you are sleeping on me, I need to go off to battle, he cut the sleeves of his own probably very expensive garment and let his male lover have a lie-in and went off. And that was something that was very much kind of admired and reproduced, not just in China, but in different areas around the world. And it's also something where if a young man wanted to learn a trade, especially like a noble trade, like to be a knight or to be a physician or a writer or a sculptor, he would often have a mentor or sort of apprentice himself to an older man, and they would actually get together and be lovers, and that was a way to kind of pick up the trade of what he wanted to learn. And he could often have relations with other women, but no other men, because that's where you were getting the information from. So it's been a lot of bisexuality, but in the past, but of course people didn't use that term. It's a very recent term, just over 100 years. When it comes to history, Black History Month's going to come up in October, and I kind of dread it every year for several reasons, because when it's LGBT History Month in February, there's no black people in it. When it's Black History Month in October, there are no LGBT people in it, it feels like. And it just feels like you've got to like cut yourself into bits or ignore parts of yourself to feel part of it. But when it comes to Black history in the UK, what I was taught in the 80s, it started and it ended with slavery. That was it. I mean, nowadays they might say a little bit about Windrush, they might say something about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, but that's it, pretty much, and just not much at all. I mean, it's reflected in my own self, really. If you're looking at these slides going by, and when it gets to the end, if you stop it, please. No, not now, but just when it gets to the end. With that, a lot of the people that I found who are bisexual people of colour tend to be either from the UK or America, although Grace Jones is Jamaican, but that's where I'm sort of getting my cultural influences in, and those are the people who are like the famous celebrities of their time. So I spoke a little bit about the Black history and how it starts and ends with slavery for the most part, but it's also really sad when it comes to history that part of slavery, it wasn't just stealing people from their homes, and so they lost their homes and their countries of origin, but it was they lost their languages because they had to learn European languages. They lost their stories that were passed down one to another. They went to places where they oftentimes weren't allowed to read or write, or learn to read or write. It was often against the law. And I know in parts of America that was very much the case. And so a lot of history has been lost that way for Black people. When it comes to Asian people, there's also an added thing of colonialism and just how that affects people even today. It's still felt right now. And that's white European people going to different parts of the world, but I think in Africa and Asia it's particularly felt, imposing their very strict rules of there is only two genders, there is only one way to be sexual, and anything that might have been in the past is just completely ignored or made illegal. And things that are going on in India right now can kind of show that. And the really sad thing is that when people of colour from these former Commonwealth countries, not just British Commonwealth, but Dutch and French and Spanish places, but when they come to the UK, because their lives in their countries of origin are just unbearable if they're LGBT+. The way that the Home Office treats them is absolutely awful, and bisexual people also get on a particularly hard trip with that, because there was a man called Horatio Edwards who just got his leave to remain just in the last couple of months, but he's been fighting for years and years and years. And one of the things that the Home Office does to prove that you're not faking, to prove that you're really LGBT, is saying, so what gay clubs do you go to since you've been in London? That's a minor thing. I've heard of black lesbians having to produce sex tapes to prove that they're actually lesbians and not faking it, because it's just so much racism. So yeah, if a gay person wants to stay in this country and they go to the Home Office and they say, what gay clubs have you gone to in London? They might be able to come up with a couple. If a bisexual person is asked that question, the bisexual person is asked, so what bisexual clubs do you go to in London? There are none. What can they say? So it's just incredibly difficult, humiliating, and there's just no need for it at all. So all of this is a reason why I'm really interested in history, and especially the history of bisexuality and the history of people of colour. I'm going to, if you could stop the thing, thank you, just read a very short poem which I wrote for Bisexual Visibility Day a couple of years back, last year I think. Bisexual Visibility Day is always on the 23rd of September every year. So here, a poem. No such thing as invisible, only just erasure. Biphobia and racism inexcusable, my mental health's in danger. Apologies do no good to me when I'm the target of violence. And you choose to ignore my cries, the voice I have is silenced. I'm standing right beside you, see? Black, bisexual, non-binary. I'm also part of LGBT. Don't pretend you can't see me. In the images that went by, I'd heard of a lot of the people, and a few of them, they were quite interesting to me because, for example, Langston Hughes, I just thought he was a black gay man and part of the Harlem Renaissance. But I didn't know that he was bisexual until I dug a bit deeper. But the biggest surprise came when it comes to Freddie Mercury. Freddie Mercury, who was the lead singer of the rock group Queen, was absolutely massive when I was growing up. And until he died, I thought he was a white gay man. But it was only after that I found out that he was born in East Africa, that he lived for most of his life in India, and then only came to the UK when he was 18, either 18 or 19. But he wasn't a person of colour. Sorry, he wasn't. He was a person of colour, and he was bisexual. He had sexual relations with people of different genders. But because, again, as I said before, biphobia and racism is so prevalent that people get whitewashed and they get gay-washed. And there's like this person knowing that he was bisexual would have meant so much to me, even though I didn't really come out to myself until I was in my early 20s. It still would have meant a lot more. And it's like, it just makes me really sad to know that the erasure is just so prevalent that people would rather you be anything but bisexual. when it comes to like celebrities coming out, it's only when people are bisexual and they say, oh, I don't like labels. No, I just prefer to be myself. I think when people come out as gay or as lesbian or as trans, they're often owning that label, owning that descriptor. But when people come out as bisexual, there's very few celebrities who will actually come out and say, I am bisexual. They'll sort of use some other words. It's like bisexual is a really dirty word, and that's a real shame. Okay, I'm just going to blurb. What am I going to do? Excuse me a second. Yes, I started up with a friend the support and social group called Bisexuals of Colour. If you just put Bis of Colour into any search engine, it will come up with our website and our Twitter handle. And there's lots of information and resources on that. But something I did last year that I'm particularly proud of is that I did a report, the first ever of its kind in the world, about the bisexual people of colour, their history, lives and experiences. And I started off just doing a survey because I wanted to know what the questions to ask were. And so I got a free survey from SurveyMonkey, 10 questions for free, and I just thought a few people might sort of answer it and I'd get an idea of what to ask. But over 130 people responded from all over the world, mainly from Europe, but a few people from the States and from Australia and New Zealand as well, which was like really shocking, but really proud of. And so, based on no money at all, because I don't get funding or I'm long-term sick, so I'm broke, I was able to create this report. And when I published the report, which is also free to download and read on the Bis of Colour website, when I did that, I thought, hang on a second, how come this is the first of its kind anywhere in the world? There's muggings in my cold flat in East London. We're using a free program to create this thing that's never existed before. What are the LGBT organisations who get megabucks, like Stonewall, what are they doing that they never even they hardly acknowledge bisexual people or trans people either? But it's like there are no funded bisexual groups in the UK at all. And all of the organisations that are supposedly LGBT, but in reality are LGGGGGGG. Maybe a T on the end if you're lucky, probably not. They do absolutely nothing because, again, lots of biphobia and lots of racism too. So out of the report came some common themes that I used to create a set of posters for LGBT history. And when Black History Month rolls around again, they'll be available again for free to anybody who wants them, so drop me an email. But it just, everything I seem to do just underlines how important it is to record history and how important it is to kind of own that, because don't expect, if you're bisexual, pansexual, trans, intersex, do not expect LGBT organisations to look out for you, because they will not. There are some straight organisations like Unison have been fantastic. They printed out loads of the posters for me. They let me use a photocopier, even though, because I'm unemployed, I'm not a member of Unison anymore. But all of these LGBT organisations do absolutely nothing for bisexual people and trans people as well. So that was my kind of little way of making history. So that's been a whistle-stop tour, and I'm going to finish before questions on a poem that I like, so I'm reading it. Just like sleeping with your false teeth in, being bisexual is not a sin. And I don't always shout it out loud, although I like to be out and proud. It's hard though, especially when some people insist that bisexuality just doesn't exist, that I'm trying to be trendy or playing it safe, inviting gays and straights to spit in my face, or completely ignore whatever I say and go back in another closet and pretend that I'm gay. So I'm telling you all now, without being too intellectual, I'm Jacq, black, happy, bisexual.
as age UK, which is what they call the gay part. If you're over 50, I know you're not over 50, you're very young, but they do have a monthly meeting for
Yes, yeah, I do know that.
Oh.
Yeah, a friend of mine runs it, Nikki.
Oh yeah, okay, she's nice.
Where can we find more of your poetry?
On either on the Buys of Colour website or on my own personal website, which is just J-Applebee. If you put that into the search engine, it's on Tumblr, because I like to put lots of photos of stuff, and Tumblr's good for that, but yeah. And also, I've got a few of my zines outside on the tables. They're all £3 each, so yeah, I'm broke. Give me some money. And most of those have got my poems and erotic stories in as well.
That'll bring them in.
How do you feel about like the parallel between pansexuality and bisexuality as words, or like in the
I'm
context?
sorry.
So, how do you feel about like the parallel between like the word pansexual and bisexual? Because I know that you kind of mentioned that bisexual to you is like liking all genders, but maybe
No, not all. More than one.
more than
gender.
one. Sorry. Yeah. Right. Okay. So that's like. I'm just trying to like figure out kind of where that like fits into like that.
It's a word that bisexual is a word that I'm comfortable using, but I know that there are some pansexual people who would describe themselves exactly the same as I do, but still wanted to call themselves pansexual. It's, it's all down to personal preference, but it's a word that I'm comfortable using. And sadly, not all pansexual people do this at all, but an awful lot have used the words bisexual as saying that's being transphobic, or that just means two. Yes, bi does mean two, like biannual, but strawberries aren't made of straw. Words change and evolve, and the word bisexual for me means more than one gender, and that's just what I'm comfy with.
Yeah, I had a bisexual friend of mine who used to say, justify the two bit by saying, but I sleep with a person of the same sex as me, and I sleep with other people. So that's where the two came in from there.
Just like I said before, gay used to mean happy. And lesbian was somebody from the islands of Lesbos, but nobody would say to a lesbian, you're not from Lesbos. Actually, a couple of years ago, it was actually some minister, mayor of Lesbos, or a minister in Lesbos, and I was switching on the news, and there was this huge guy saying, I am a proud lesbian. I thought, whoa, okay, what's happening here? To actually stop lesbians from using the word lesbian because they weren't born on Lesbos. So his campaign was not successful. But yeah, words change because words aren't just things that we say, they're expressions of ourselves as well. Any more questions?
No, we done? That was fantastic. Thank you so much.